Imagine this. You walk into a room and everyone smiles when they see you. Not because you're powerful, not because you're respected, but because you're agreeable. You make people feel comfortable. You never cause waves, you always say yes. People call you kind, easygoing, thoughtful, but deep down there's a quiet ache, a weariness, a sense that you're constantly performing. You catch yourself apologizing for things that aren't your fault. You shrink your opinions to keep the peace. You give more than you have, hoping it will finally be enough to be loved. You wonder, if you stopped being nice, if you said what you really thought, would anyone stay? Here's the paradox. Society rewards the nice person, but often ignores their pain. Beneath the gentle exterior lies a lifetime of suppression, fear, and survival. And the most haunting question of all, what if your goodness isn't a virtue, but a shield? Is it possible that your kindness is not truly kindness, but a deeply rooted trauma response? Could it be that somewhere in your childhood you learned that being pleasing was safer than being honest? That silence earned affection, and invisibility meant survival? If so, what happens when you finally stop performing? This isn't just about manners, it's about identity, power, and the subtle ways we abandon ourselves to be loved. And it begins much earlier than you think. You didn't start out this way. You weren't born afraid to speak or terrified of conflict. You didn't instinctively prioritize the needs of others at the expense of your own. No one enters the world believing that love must be earned through quiet compliance. That belief was taught to you, slowly, painfully, and often without words. Pete Walker, a psychotherapist and trauma expert, names it for what it is, fawning. One of the 4 classic trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. The fawn response is when a child learns that safety lies in appeasing others. To fawn is to disappear inside politeness, to blend into expectations. And what's tragic is how invisible this becomes in adulthood. Society applauds the nice person. You're the emotional sponge, the mediator, the one who never gets angry. No one sees the exhaustion underneath. No one suspects you're bleeding from a wound you don't even remember getting. Carl Jung would call this the beginning of shadow work, the moment you realize that your niceness, your so-called virtue, might actually be the mask you wear to hide a fractured self. The shadow isn't evil, it's the truth you've buried, the rage you swallowed, the voice you silenced. And here's the problem. The longer you wear the mask, the more you forget you ever had a face underneath. Philosophers have always warned us of this danger. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "Every profound spirit needs a mask." But he didn't say that with admiration, he said it with sorrow. Because when you confuse a survival strategy with your identity, you become a stranger to yourself. Arthur Schopenhauer, ever the cynic, argued that much of what we call morality is actually cowardice in disguise, a fear of disturbing the social order, even when the social order is what's killing us. Being nice becomes the virtue of the obedient, the terrified, the spiritually numb. And Jean-Paul Sartre would point out the existential horror of it all. When you deny your own freedom to choose, when you suppress your authenticity to please others, you fall into what he called bad faith. A self-deception so complete that you no longer remember you had any other option. The roots of pathological niceness go even deeper, into the soil of childhood. Maybe you were raised by emotionally immature parents. Maybe love was conditional, dependent on your ability to make their life easier. Maybe your anger was punished, your needs dismissed, your individuality seen as rebellion. So you adapted, you smiled, you served, you softened your edges until there was nothing sharp left to protect you. And over time, that adaptation became your truth. Not because it was real, but because it was safe. But safety is not freedom, and love built on self-erasure is not love at all. This is where the real horror lies. Niceness becomes a prison with velvet walls, comfortable, acceptable, and almost impossible to notice. You look like the perfect partner, the ideal friend, the dream employee, but you're dissociating from your own desires. You're haunted by the faint memory of a voice that once belonged to you. You don't know what you want anymore, only what others want from you. And the worst part, no one suspects a thing, because you're so nice. It creeps in quietly. At first, it's just a tightness in your chest after a long conversation, an exhaustion that doesn't feel like simple fatigue. Then it grows. You start to dread phone calls. You replay every text before sending it. You lie awake at night worrying about whether you disappointed someone without knowing it. You become excellent at reading micro-expressions, tones, pauses, the 1,000 little signals that tell you how to behave, what to say, who to be. This is the curse of the compulsively nice. You don't live your own life. You manage other people's emotions inside your body. Neurologically, the cost is immense. Chronic fawning activates the stress response system. The amygdala fires as if you're always in danger. Cortisol surges, your nervous system becomes locked in hypervigilance. Over time, this leads to burnout, adrenal fatigue, immune issues, and even depression. Not because you're weak, but because you're not supposed to live this way. Your brain was never designed to perform safety for others every waking moment. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning and decision-making, gets hijacked by the need to appease. You stop making choices from a place of desire or truth. You make them from fear. You live in survival mode, and in survival mode there is no self, only strategy. Relationships suffer too. You might think you're being helpful, loving, supportive, but you're also being dishonest. You hide your resentment until it leaks out passive-aggressively. You say yes when you mean no. You hold space for everyone, but there's no space held for you. Eventually, even intimacy becomes performative. People don't truly connect with you, they connect with your performance. And worse, they start to expect it. The workplace rewards people-pleasers. Romantic partners praise your selflessness until they resent your lack of boundaries. Until one day you disappear, quietly, emotionally, existentially, and no one notices. Why would they? You never made a fuss, you never demanded anything, you were nice. But beneath that politeness is a deep loneliness, a life lived without being fully seen, a deep internalized belief that your true self is unworthy of love. So you must hide it to survive, and if you believe that long enough, you begin to act it out. You attract partners who take more than they give. Employers who exploit your work ethic. Friends who only show up when they need something. You reinforce the very abandonment you fear. This is trauma reenactment, a psychological loop where unresolved pain from the past recreates itself in the present. It's not conscious, it's not your fault, but it is dangerous. And here is the deeper tragedy. Being nice robs the world of who you actually are. The part of you that laughs loudly, argues passionately, says no without guilt. The version of you with opinions, boundaries, fire, that version stays hidden because long ago it wasn't safe to be her, or him, or them. And so you became a diplomat, a chameleon, a peacekeeper. You traded authenticity for belonging, but what you got wasn't belonging, it was approval. And approval is conditional. It can vanish the moment you stop performing. So ask yourself, who would remain if you stopped pretending? Would you still be loved? Would you still exist? Or would the entire identity you've built collapse the moment you said, no, I won't be nice anymore? That is the fear. But it is also the threshold. Because behind that fear, something wild and real is waiting to come home. It starts with rage. Not the kind that lashes out or seeks revenge, but the kind that simmers quietly, like an underground river of truth carving its way back to the surface. The rage of the self, finally tired of being silenced. The holy fire that says, I've had enough. And this is where the rebellion begins. Breaking free from the nice persona isn't a cute Instagrammable glow-up. It's messy, it's ugly, it's disorienting. Because to unlearn fawning is to betray the very system you once believed kept you safe. You're not just changing behaviors, you're confronting the ghosts of your childhood. You're defying the unspoken rules of your upbringing. You're saying to your inner child, we're not going to beg anymore. We're going to speak. We're going to fight. We're going to matter. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, the reclaiming of the self from the grip of the unconscious. To do it, you must walk into the shadow. You must face the parts of yourself you've disowned. The anger, the hunger, the no, the I want, the I don't care if you like it. This is not selfishness. This is sacred. The real you isn't fragile. The real you doesn't exist to be palatable. The real you has opinions, edges, stories that weren't made to be edited for social approval. And here's the great irony. When you stop trying to be liked, you start becoming respected, not by everyone, but by those whose respect is real. It takes practice. Saying no the first time might make you nauseous. Holding a boundary might trigger guilt so deep it feels like you're doing something wrong. You might lose people, friends, partners, mentors, who were only attached to your utility, not your essence. Let them go. Because you're not here to be a mirror for others. You're not here to be everyone's emotional cushion, their therapist, their safe haven, while your own house burns. You're here to exist in your full, complex humanity. Viktor Frankl said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. You may not be able to change the past, the parents who failed you, the systems that conditioned you, the betrayals that made you shrink, but you can choose now. You can revolt, quietly or loudly. You can become someone who no longer needs to trade authenticity for affection, and history is filled with those who did. Think of Soren Kierkegaard, who rejected the comfortable life expected of him to live a radically honest inner life. He was mocked, isolated, but he chose truth over acceptance. Think of James Baldwin, who refused to smile politely through racial injustice, even when doing so would have made his life easier. Think of Simone de Beauvoir, who broke from gender roles and demanded space not just to be liked, but to be heard. Their lives weren't easy, but they were theirs, and that's what's at stake. This isn't about becoming rude, it's about becoming real. It's about ending the emotional slavery of compulsive niceness and stepping into a deeper integrity. One that might scare people, one that might cost you comfort, but one that will finally feel like home. You've been polite long enough, now it's time to become true. There's something terrifying about looking in the mirror and realizing that the person staring back at you has been living a lie, one stitched together by fear, reinforced by praise, and protected by habit. But here's the truth. You were never meant to be nice. You were meant to be whole, and wholeness is not always pretty. It doesn't always smile at the right time. It doesn't always say yes. It doesn't always please. Sometimes wholeness roars, sometimes it weeps, sometimes it walks away, even when it's easier to stay. The ultimate truth is this: niceness is not the same as goodness, and pretending to be good at the cost of your truth is its own kind of moral failure. You've spent so long trying to be acceptable that you forgot how to be alive. You forgot what it means to laugh from your gut, to cry in front of people without apologizing, to say no and mean it. To cry in front of people without apologizing, to say no and mean it, to want something without immediately suppressing it. You've learned to filter yourself before you even speak, as if your truth were too much for the room to handle. But what if it isn't? What if the world has been waiting for the real you, not the well-behaved version? Here's what they never tell you. Being true to yourself is not about becoming a better person, it's about becoming a person at all. A living, breathing, feeling being. Not a ghost, not a service, not a smile with no story behind it. Carl Jung understood that the path to true integration requires facing the parts of yourself you were taught to hide. He called it the shadow, not because it is evil, but because it is unseen. And what is unseen controls you. But once you see it, once you welcome the anger, the longing, the edges, you are no longer bound by the old rules. You no longer need to play the part. You can grieve the years you spent shrinking. You can reclaim the child who learned to fawn. You can begin again, not as a performance, but as a person. Because here is the radical shift. You were never too much. You were simply with the wrong people. And the people who truly see you, the ones who are safe for your unfiltered self, are waiting. But they can't find you if you're buried beneath 1,000 layers of niceness. So dig through the masks, the apologies, the rehearsed versions of yourself. Go down into the place where your voice trembles with truth and speak from there. Live from there. Philosopher Alan Watts once said, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth." But maybe the goal was never to define yourself with a label, nice, good, perfect. Maybe the goal was simply to be real enough to stop defining at all, to be a force, a presence, a mystery. The ultimate truth is this: you were not born to be liked, you were born to live, and living begins the moment you stop hiding. Somewhere deep inside you, there's a version of yourself you haven't met yet. They don't apologize for existing. They don't say yes when they mean no. They don't shrink around loud voices or edit themselves for comfort. They move through the world with quiet power, not to please, not to perform, but because they remember something you've forgotten, that you are not here to be a supporting character in everyone else's story. You are the story. And yes, choosing truth over approval may cost you things. You may lose people, you may lose comfort, you may lose the illusion of safety. But in that space, after the masks fall, after the silence breaks, you will find something rare, peace that doesn't depend on performance. This isn't a call to become unkind, it's a call to become real, to speak like your voice matters, to feel without shame, to stand, even if it means standing alone. Because your niceness was never the problem, your silence was. So tonight, as the noise of the world fades, ask yourself, if you stop being nice, if you stop performing, if you let the world meet the real you, wouldn't that be the beginning of everything? The rebellion has already begun. Now it's your turn to rise.